The Falkland War, 1982. After the papal visit of 1982, I was very much alert to the activities of the Church of Rome. And in early April 1982, Mr. Collier, pastor of Lindsley Baptist Church, came to our church midweek to our prayer meeting, and he spoke on the subject of the Falklands War. This was because England was at war with Argentina in 1982. He informed the Church of the ancient conflict between the Roman Catholic system and the Reformation in England, Argentina being a Catholic country. Mr. Collier was a friend of Dr. Ian Paisley, and through his connections we were able to hear Ian Paisley preach at Mr. Green's chapel in London. It was always good to hear him preach, as he was an excellent speaker, even though we differed over certain points. In connection with Mr. Collier, it was remarked by his family that if he had been disturbed by events in the first 25 years of his pastorate, he was even more profoundly disturbed by developments since. Blatant heretical statements from so-called church leaders, the fresh impetus given to the ecumenical drift by the charismatic movement, the historic visit of the Pope in this country in 1982, all these things affected him deeply. His response, however, was not to project himself back into the past in a nostalgia of better days. It was to work for the present and for the future. He was to recognise that God is still working today in raising up a witness in the gospel. He found encouragement in his contacts with other ministers both within his own denomination and outside, and it is simply a matter of fact that the extent of such contact increased in his latter days. At this time there was a memorial rally held in Oxford to remember the martyrs Cranmer, Latimer and Ridley, and I remember Ian Paisley echoing the words, "Fear not, Master Ridley, we shall light a fire this day in England that will never be put out." Shortly after the accession of Mary in 1553, a summons was sent to Latimer to appear before the council in Westminster. Though he might have escaped by flight, and though he knew, as he quaintly remarked, Smithfield already groans for him, he at once joyfully obeyed. The pursuant, he said, was a welcome messenger. The hardship of his imprisonment and the long disputations at Oxford told severely on his health, but he endured all with unbroken cheerfulness. On the 16th of October, 1555, Hugh Latimer and Ridley were led to the stake at Oxford. Never was man more free than Latimer from the taint of fanaticism, or less dominated by vainglory, but the motives which now inspired his courage not only placed him beyond the influence of fear, but also enabled him to taste, in dying, an ineffable thrill of victorious achievement. Ridley he greeted with the words, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England as, I trust, shall never be put out." He received the flame, as it were embracing it, after he had stroked his face with his hands, and, as it were, bathed them in a little in the fire. He soon died, as it appeared, with very little pain or none. Archbishop Cranmer, on the day of his execution, he dramatically withdrew his recantations, to die a heretic to Roman Catholics and a martyr to others. His legacy lives on within the Church of England through the Book of Common Prayer and the 39 Articles, an Anglican statement of faith derived from his work. He renounced the recantations that he had written or signed with his own hand since his degradation, and as such he stated this hand will be punished by being burnt first. He then said, "And as for the Pope, I refuse him as Christ's enemy and Antichrist with all his false doctrine." He was pulled from the pulpit and taken to where Latimer and Ridley had been burnt 6 months before. As the flames drew around him, he fulfilled his promise by placing his right hand into the heart of the fire, and his dying words were, "Lord Jesus, receive my spirit." I see the heavens opened and Jesus standing at the right hand of God.